I said, I think humans are capable of anything necessary for survival. Probably 30 years ago, I was studying the Baka people in the Amazon who live in an ecotonic system it's the most dangerous in the world. More poisonous things can kill you. And the children by the age of 8 or 9 have a PhD level knowledge of botany because that's what's required to survive. You have the Harmattar, people in Mexico who, can run 30, 40, 50 miles every day because they run every day as just their existence because that's what's necessary for survival. A lot of human superpowers emerged because they were necessary for survival. And I think the problem, ironically, is that we live in a society where our kids don't need to operate at a high level to survive. And what we don't realize is that when you eliminate that need to actually, and I don't want to use this word, but to survive, you actually turn off a mechanism inside of a human being that causes them to create.
Welcome to Level Up Loan Officer. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Jay, and we're here to elevate your life and your business.
Today we are super excited. We have Erwin McManus with us. Erwin, you're our first guest on the podcast, so thank you so much.
I'm glad to be here.
We actually just had Erwin speak at our annual Level Up LO Sales Conference, and I'm still a little just vibrating. I think is probably the best way to say it. Just the energy and the thought, and you dropped so many nuggets. I need to go back and watch the video of just the way and I think the thing that's so interesting is some of this we've heard before, but the way you deliver this message is so unique. And for those of you that may not know, but Erwin is a best-selling author and just an incredible life and story. But I'd like to dive into just a little bit of the mind shift, which is your book. And you started to walk us through that, but you said some things that I'll never forget. And these were things that I've struggled with or have thought of or been intentional about. But one of them was that the negative things stick.
Yeah.
And the positive things flee. Can you expand on that? Help us understand that maybe because we do that doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. This is just the human journey.
Yeah, it's if you look at humans as a species, which I tend to do, it's one of those interesting species defects that negative emotions, negative experiences, negative voices, they just stick to us. They stay, and they're very hard to extricate out of your soul. Positive emotions and positive memories and positive experiences seem to flush right through us. And so we can be incredibly happy and have an incredible day, and then one bad thing happens and our whole day is ruined.
Yeah.
And you can even see it in small children, right? They have a great day at Disney, and then you tell them it's time to go home, and now they're crying and their life is over, right? And you go, wait a minute, we just had 6 hours of fun, 6 hours of awesome, and now your whole life is ruined because you're having to go home and go to bed.
Yeah.
And there's just something in the psychology of us as human beings where negative emotions like fear and self-doubt, the sense of insignificance, jealousy, envy, bitterness, all those emotions, if they get inside of you, they stay. They never leave by accident. They only leave on purpose. You have to purpose to get rid of them. Positive emotions never stay by accident. They only stay on purpose. You have to choose to keep them.
I hope you got that. That was like mic drop. Boom. Okay, we're done. No, it was just so good. Jay?
I think that we have a carousel society, right? And we're programmed for negativity. So what are some tools that you would say, practically, how do we fight the negativity or how do we lean into the positive? Because I think we are programmed, as you said, for survival. So we're seeking out the negative. That's why we do that. We don't live in that society anymore. We don't have, the saber-toothed tiger chasing us. But there's obviously still threats that we are programmed to look for, but what are your tools or exercises or practices to be able to operate with more positivity and be able to hold on to it?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is important to remember is that our baseline determines our emotional experience in terms of what we expect for our lives. And so we live in, because you say we have a baseline of negativity. What actually is going on is we have a baseline of high expectation. We watch people on social media. We see people, experiencing the most incredible life. So that becomes the baseline of our expectation. And then our lives never meet up to that baseline. That's why we feel depressed. That's why we feel anxious. That's why we feel negative emotions. And so if you grew up, in a steel mill and you're working in the coal mines, and everyone in your world worked in those coal mines, and your dad came home full of soot every day, and that's life, you didn't have a high baseline. You thought this is what life is. So ironically, life wasn't that good, but you were not that depressed because your expectation, your baseline was so low.
Right.
So what's happened is we have a very high baseline without giving people tools to actually live up to that baseline. So you have a lot of people who want to be rich, but they don't know what work needs to be put in to be rich. We have people who want to be famous, but they don't know the work that takes to actually hold that fame without letting it destroy you. And so some of it is you have to deal with your expectations. Depression is an interesting thing because you cannot be depressed if you cannot imagine a better version of you.
Interesting.
You cannot be depressed if you cannot imagine a better experience of life than you have. So depression is actually the gap between expectation and reality. And so we become depressed when we're like, I thought I'd be better than this, or I thought my life would be better than this, or I thought I would have more success than this, or, I thought life wouldn't go this way. And so that's the space of depression. So there's an interesting thing. You have to have big dreams and I'm going to say, and maybe low expectations
Right.
for happiness. You don't want to give up on big dreams, because then you actually do become depressed because you give up hope, because humans are designed for progress. What actually sets depression in is when you do not believe you can make progress. So it's not where you are, it's where you believe you can go.
Yeah.
And that's the irony of false hope. False hope is better than no hope.
Yeah.
Right. In a very odd way, because the counter opposite of depression is hope.
Yeah.
And so when you lose hope is when you become depressed. So I would say the main thing is, in a sense, have low expectations of what the world owes you, and high expectation of what you can bring to the world.
Right. I think that's a great one. I think it comes back to our purpose, right? And you talked about happiness, and I think too many people were pursuing happiness instead of their purpose. And you're going to, one of my core values, which is living in abundance, which is like not what I get, but what can I bring? And if people are bringing their best, doesn't matter what anybody else is doing.
Yeah, I'm very pro happiness, but happiness is like an illusion.
Yeah.
If it's like a mirage, if you chase it, you just end up wandering in the desert.
100%.
And it's almost like happiness happens when you're not thinking about happiness. Happiness happens when you're thinking about serving, when you're thinking about living with purpose, when you're thinking about doing good in the world. And it's almost the moment you have intention and purpose in your life, happiness seems to come unexpectedly. When you're pursuing happiness, you're just never happy because it's so elusive. It's like a horizon. It's beautiful, but you never live there.
Yeah. So I got to follow up to what you said. You talked about, if you grew up in a blue collar family and your dad's got this rough job, and it struck something because my dad grew up in a very blue collar family, and his dad had to work. So my grandfather had to work nights at a lumber mill. And one of the lessons that he told me is like, when he's leaving the house one night, he stares at my dad and my uncle when they're like in high school, and he says, "You guys better be better than me. Like, I have a crappy job," probably used different words, "and we're not in a great spot. You guys better be better." And my dad told me that story, and he is obviously in a lot better place. And he goes, "My job that I've always thought about is, how do I make it so that your job, Jay, is really hard?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, it was easy for me to be a better dad than my dad. it was easy for me to get a better job than him. I want you to be able to have to strive for it. So what would your advice be to somebody that, because we know comparison is a thief of joy. How do you, if you have a parent that is successful, if you're in an ecosystem that's positive, then you have some gap and gain struggle, what would be your recipe or your remedy that you would encourage, somebody like my son that's in a good ecosystem and positive, and so the bar's high?
Yeah, I think it's about changing the bar. Because if the bar is always about like financial success or educational development, or we tend to have external measures as the bar, rather than I just want you to be a better man, or a better human, or a better woman. And so if we can make the bar who you are as a human being, and then allow the outcomes to come as they come, that actually I think is the ideal of parenting. Because most of us are projecting our own insignificance on our children. We need our children to prove to us that we're more important than we are. We need them to succeed so that we feel like we were awesome.
Yeah.
And when Aaron and Mariah were kids, and Kim's an educator, my wife, and if they came home with anything below an A, she would just be tormented. And I went, honey, it's not your grade, it's their grade. She goes, this is a reflection on us. But it's not a reflection on me. I was a D student. They're awesome. Anything about failing, they've outshined me. And so the challenge is, Kim's is A student, and anything below an A was a bad reflection on her. And I was an F student, and anything above an F was like, you've outshined me already. And I think that attitude adjustment is really interesting, because I didn't see my value in my kids' grades, so I didn't project that on them. But I think most parents do. Your kid becomes a doctor, your kid becomes a lawyer, it becomes an engineer, or he becomes, or she becomes whatever, an architect. So oftentimes we help our children choose careers that make us feel like we're validated, rather than helping our kids find what really brings them joy and fulfillment.
Yeah. Well, I think that if that's the definition, is joy and fulfillment, then that's a great measure of success.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic, because my daughter, when she was probably in second grade, she put a picture of Einstein on her wall because she wanted to be a scientist. And I'm like, you want to be a scientist? She goes, yeah. I said, don't you think you should be like a musician? My wife's like, what kind of parent are you? You're supposed to want her to be a scientist. I said, have you heard her voice? No, she's like, she had perfect pitch. She's incredibly talented. And I love that she was a scientist, wanted to be a scientist. But I also saw her talent, and she started writing music when she was 5 years old, and recorded her first song when she was 14 that played on Grey's Anatomy. Wow. And at the highest rated moment in Grey's Anatomy history. And it's first singing for 4 minutes, 11 seconds. And yes, I'm proud.
Oh,
and, but, she wanted to be a scientist, right? And so I think I was the opposite parent. Don't do what you feel obligated to do, or what other people tell you makes you valuable. Find whatever causes your soul to sing. I love it, and do that.
Yeah.
That's great.
You made mention that some people change and some people don't. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's my lifelong study, and is how humans change and why humans change. And I remember one time my wife asked me, do I think humans are capable of anything? And I said, I think humans are capable of anything necessary for survival. Probably 30 years ago, I was studying the Baka people in the Amazon who live in an ecotonic system it's the most dangerous in the world. More poisonous things can kill you. And the children by the age of 8 or 9 have a PhD level knowledge of botany, because that's what's required to survive. And you have the Harmattar, people in Mexico who, can run 30, 40, 50 miles every day, because they run every day as just their existence, because that's what's necessary for survival. A lot of human superpowers emerge because they were necessary for survival. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem, ironically, is that we live in a society where our kids don't need to operate at a high level to survive. And even now, I mean, our own cultural conversation is, shouldn't the government take care of everyone? And one of the big conversations I remember at a TED conference I was at a decade ago was that every human being is going to have a guaranteed salary in America. And that is one of the economic philosophies, is to make sure every American has a salary paid by the government. And what we don't realize is that when you eliminate that need to actually, and I don't want to use this word, but yeah, to survive, you actually turn off a mechanism inside of a human being that causes them to create and to be the highest version of themselves. So there's a dynamic there with, even with parenting, where you want to teach your children to love risk, to be able to have resilience to failure, and at the same time to be responsible and take personal ownership for failure and for mistakes. And that's a part of the dynamic of it, So I think some people don't change. I'll sum it like this. Your language will let me know if you can change. If you are always blaming something outside of you, you will not change. If you take personal responsibility for your life and for your situations, you're almost guaranteed to change. And as a Latino, I can tell you it's a language thing, because in Spanish, you can't say I broke it. In Spanish, you say se quebró, it broke. And you distance yourself from responsibility over something that broke. And so I grew up going, se quebró. And, I was in the room, it was in the room, it happened. And cultures that whose language actually takes more ownership actually elevate more economically and socially. And so even language will give you an inside perception on the success of that culture.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Jay, you spoke a few minutes ago about words and navigating our reality really with the words we tell ourselves and the words we show up with. This feels like it's just such a connection between you two and where you were going, and you didn't really know what Erwin was going to talk about. Kind of unpack that.
Well, I did. I was talking to Gabby, and I was like, hey, first of all, I got to talk to Erwin. He was awesome. She's like, he'll be fine. I said, but second of all his points are my points. Just said a little differently. So I think, I believe our narrative is so important. And I believe one of the struggles that's impacted society today is there's been a reinforcement of what you think is true. And we have to disengage from that, because not all thoughts are good thoughts. Not all feelings are good feelings. And I believe, what I talked about was navigating our narrative and really being disciplined with how long we sit with that. And you spoke to that, really well. So how do you encourage people to navigate their narrative into a productive space?
Yeah, and there's this great adage that you have to move from listening to yourself to talking to yourself. And I think the one place we're not supposed to be good listeners are to the negative voices in our heads.
I love that. That is so good.
And we're all, taught to be good listeners, but this is the one place I'm going to give you a reversal.
Right.
You need to talk to those inner voices and shut them down.
Yes.
And it kind of drives my family a little bit, because I have almost a zero tolerance for negative language. And not about other people, even though I don't like that either, about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even when a person betrays himself by saying, well, I'm not very good at this.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'll say, okay, well, let's back up.
Yeah.
Let's start over again.
Yeah.
And because I found myself doing that so many times. In fact, my son started reprimanding me because I was so self-deprecating that I would always begin by saying something negative about myself. And and so for years and years and years, people wouldn't know what I achieved at all, because I didn't feel permission to say anything I'd actually accomplished.
Yeah.
And I could only speak about the things where I'd failed or done wrong or fell short. So I had that negative self-talk. And so I had to begin by, first of all, not giving myself permission to speak negatively about myself. It's just a protective device so that I can say it before you say it.
Mm.
Interesting.
You see, it's a way of protecting myself from not being attacked or feeling demeaned, because if you feel like you're nothing, someone's going to tell you you're nothing. So I might as well say it first before you say it. So
you think negative self-talk is partially tied to a way to protect yourself?
It is. It's a self-protective mechanism. And it only has really two sides. One side is, I really believe this about myself, so I'm going to say it first. Or I really believe I'm awesome, so I'm going to say the negative so that you tell me the positive.
Oh, I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to trigger you to affirm me by demeaning myself, which is still incredibly negative and toxic.
Yeah. Four Agreements is a good book, and they talk about that concept of being your own best friend. And, I think what you said was awesome. Like, I want to write that down. Be a bad listener to your own negative thoughts.
Yeah,
And
that's a t-shirt.
yeah, it really is, because the truth of it is, like, I don't know if it's from that book, but it's been said so often, like, if no one in your life would you tolerate to be in a relationship with if they spoke to you the way you speak to yourself, right? Like, you would totally disenfranchise yourself. You'd divorce your spouse if they talk to you the way you talk to yourself. And I've seen it so much. I'm a former basketball coach, and I still work with kids. And like this summer, I was working with this player. There was many kids in the gym, and I could just tell he went into the tank. And I went up to him and I said, if I heard the things that you've been telling yourself in the last 30 seconds, would I be really disappointed? And he said, yes. I said, you have to be your own first coach, because I guarantee you, your parents would shoot me if I said the things that you just said to yourself. So you shouldn't allow yourself to do that.
And on that note, I think that we've got to find a way to infuse this into younger people. Like, I don't know about you, but none of this was part of me growing up. I mean, I didn't have those influences that talked like this. So, I think it's a conscious effort for us to infuse these concepts into society from a very little age. Because exactly what you're talking about takes intentionality, it takes courage, it takes effort. And you said, change a story. Change the story you're telling yourself, right? And that's really what it is. But if you don't know, or you're not like connecting to that is wrong behavior or not the best behavior for you to live your wildest dreams, then I think there's a gap there.
Yeah. Well, Jay, even your description of the world tells me you had great parents.
I did.
Because you assume that people would never be in a relationship with someone who talked to them the way they talk to themselves. And actually the opposite is true.
They'd seek that out to fulfill that internal.
Because they don't believe they deserve better. And so have you ever noticed that people you could love date toxic people and then date another toxic person and date another toxic person? And then when they date someone who isn't toxic, they don't stay with them. It's because they don't believe they deserve a healthy relationship.
Right.
And so they look for a person who matches their negative internal narrative.
Yeah.
And says the worst things about themselves. And so it's actually worse than you think. That person who's talking negatively about themselves will surround themselves with people who reaffirm that negative narrative for them.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to violate that space by saying, stop believing that narrative.
Right.
But they're like, well, that's what my parents told me. It's what everybody around me told me. And so it's what I tell myself. And so you're the alien element in their story, telling them that they actually have talent.
Yeah.
That they have potential, they can do this. And so what you have to do is you have to convince people to believe the story about themselves they wish was true. Because they can't see themselves there.
Yeah.
You go, okay, I'm going to tell you who you're going to become. And if you'll own this narrative, you will become this person.
Right.
And I'm not going to try to argue with you about who you were, because maybe you were that person. But it's irrelevant now, because now you're becoming something else.
Yeah. My dad was a marriage and family counselor for a little while. And one of the topics, that discussion came up a lot in our household, like, why do people, like, they were in crazy land, they get into like a healthy space, and they go back to wanting the crazy. And my parents always said, if you don't get comfortable in a healthy environment, what only feels comfortable to you is the chaos or the crazy. And so we have to be aware of, we're going to gravitate back to what we're familiar with.
Yeah.
Because we're wired from an early space to look for familiarity. And if a positive ecosystem isn't familiar to you, you're going to run from it. And if a chaos, negative, destructive environment is familiar, then you're going to seek that out.
Even if that's on an internal basis, not external, right? Meaning that if you're comfortable with the negativity and the story either you've been told or that you're telling yourself, that's your space of comfort.
Yeah.
And so it's challenging to change.
It's also the identity that you form around the stories you tell yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't the experiences you've had.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say, well, my experiences made me like this. And the answer is actually, no, it didn't. It's your response to those experiences that made you who you are.
100%.
And so you look at the Joker and Batman and Bane and Superman, and they all have the same backstory. They're all orphans. They were all abandoned.
Mm.
And how they responded to their trauma shaped who they became.
Right.
And those narratives, because really graphic novels, comic books are just mythologies.
Right.
They're the modern mythologies of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
But those mythologies carry the story of us. And the same person who becomes the Joker has the potential to become the Batman.
Mm-hmm.
The same person who can become bitter and angry and dark and become Bane is the same person that can become an ideal and become a hero like Superman.
Yeah.
It's all about our responses to the pain and trauma and circumstances of our life.
Okay. So that's a great setup to a question I've been dying to ask you. So I'm so excited to see you today because I loved your book, The 7 Frequencies.
Ah, awesome.
And took the survey, got my results, wasn't surprised by them. And when I listened to your book, you talked about your kind of natural tendencies of being, or the 3 frequencies you're most comfortable in, but you talked about your evolution to becoming all 7 and being able to connect in that space. And so when I kind of first read it, I was like, well, this is what I am. But I'd love to be a healer, and that's not part of my natural state. So how did you evolve your frequencies and develop the ability to attune to the necessary frequency? And what would be your recommendation for someone like myself who kind of has I got my HOE lane that I kind of gravitate into, but how do I be able to turn the dial to find that?
That's a great question. English is my second language.
Mm-hmm.
Spanish was my first language. And people are always a little confused by that because I don't have an accent. But wherever I moved, my accent changed. When I lived in North Carolina, I had a Southern accent. When I lived in Texas, I started sounding like a Texan. I went up to Seattle. I started talking like I was from Seattle instantly, went to LA. And so I always just began parroting whatever accent was there. And what I realized was that people go, oh, you're good with languages. I go, no, I'm really good at listening.
Okay.
And really, accents are about our ability to listen, not our ability to speak. It's the same way with frequencies. It's our ability to listen. I've spent my life studying communication, but the reason I could write the 7 frequencies of communication, it was not because I learned how to communicate, because I learned how to listen. And if you want to develop different frequencies, you have to listen better. Yeah, because we speak from our core frequencies. You're a challenger, and I think you said you're a motivator. And I'm a frequency called a maven. My wife is commander. My son is commander. My daughter is a challenger. I'm just surrounded with these different frequencies, and you have to learn how to hear them. And I kind of joke about this because Kim and I have been married 41 years, and every night I say, I love you. And every night she says, lock the doors and turn off the lights. She begins with 2 commands. She ends the night with 2 commands every night. And some days I'll say, oh, I'm so glad you said that, because it wouldn't even occur to me. I was going to turn all the lights on and leave all the doors unlocked. And I go, she'll say, and I go, honey, thank you. That's the first time you've ever, given me that insight. But it's every night. And I translate that to mean, keep me safe. and keep us, under budget, and, protect our money and protect our lives. And so I retranslate her commands. And when my son took the 7 frequencies of communication, and he comes out as a really strong commander, he'll send me texts now because we work together in the business world. Hey, Dad, I'm going to send you 5 ideas. They're all going to come across like commands, but they're really just ideas. I don't even know if I'm committed to them. And so I reinterpret that, but it also helps him.
Yeah.
And he's become so aware that he can actually just make a statement that comes across like a command. A question feels like a command. Our daughter Mariah is a challenger off the scale, and even when she does a kind thing, it comes across like a challenge. Like Mariah will say to me, Dad, you've made a commitment to me to only do things you love, to not do things that have obligation anymore. You've lived that life. You've committed yourself. I just want you to do what you love now. Isn't that the most darling thing? But she'll send me a text. Are you doing what you love? Like, yes, maybe not enough. I should love them more. And she just
Challenge accepted.
Even when she's trying to encourage me, it's a challenge.
It's her. Yeah.
And so you begin to realize that everyone's primary frequency is the default mode. You don't realize you're using it. You're just being you. It's not a frequency that's out there. It's a frequency that's in here. And it's actually neurological. It's the way your brain functions. When you're a commander, you're just very utilitarian in the way you organize reality. As a challenger, you just see everything as a glass half full that could be filled. You see every human being as almost there, but not quite. And right, and you don't stop and think about it. It's just the way you see reality. And if you're a motivator, you just see everyone needing to be encouraged. You see everyone as maybe a little winded, maybe a little discouraged, and your job is to infuse energy and to bring hope and to inspire them. And you don't have a default mode. Oh, I need to go in there and encourage everyone. You're just walking in and being you.
Yeah.
What would take you work is to go, I got to go in there and command everyone. You would actually have to move into a default mode and go, what does that sound like for me?
Right.
What does that look like for me? And, for yourself, let's say, if your, default mode is you need to be a seer. You need to go cast vision. You need to inspire the room to see the big picture. Your challenger mode is going, why? Why do I need to cast vision? Everybody just needs to suck it up and sacrifice. And if everybody just did what they could do, we would have a vision.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you have to default mode. When it's not your frequency, you have to begin to ask yourself, when I need someone to speak into my life to give me vision, what does that sound like? And so I listened to thousands and thousands of hours of speakers over my lifetime, where I paid attention and asked the question, what's happening inside of me? What has the communicator caused to happen inside of my soul? I don't ask, what are they doing? I ask, what is it doing to me? And then I was able to identify how those frequencies were invading my internal space. Because I wanted to know, how is it possible someone could be on a stage with 100,000 people in the room and I'm hiding way, way, way in the bleachers, and it seeps into my soul. And it's causing me to grapple with a change I need to make. There's almost like a magic to communication that's life-changing. And so when you realize sometimes you need to walk into a room and use a frequency that is not your primary frequency, because it's not about you, it's about the room needs. That will begin to open you up to other frequencies.
That's a great filter. It's not about you. What does the room need?
Yeah.
I think as we think about this podcast and who we're trying to serve and pour into, that's loan officers. And so when we think about just the frequency that's needed in the moment, as loan officers, they're serving their clients, they're serving their referral partners. There are challenges and obstacles, and I think, and there's wins and there's beauty, and to be part of somebody's journey to buy a home is such a gift, because it's truly just one of the biggest moments of their lives. And to walk them through whatever they need to go through to get to the finish line, it doesn't come without struggle. So as we're talking about our frequencies, and maybe you are naturally one versus the other. And in that moment, it's good to hear that we can evolve as long as we're intentional and we're really open to what is needed in the moment. So you
If-
feel like we can do that.
Yeah, it's not a static system. It's not, oh, I'm commander and that's what I am for life. I'm a challenger. No, you can grow. You can deepen your frequency through empathy and authenticity. And then you can expand your frequencies and through empathy and authenticity. And you know, even as a loan officer, my mom was actually a loan officer
really?
times and working in the banking world and everything. But you have different needs at different times. Some customers need you to be in a professor frequency, just giving them facts so they know you actually know what you're doing. And it elevates their confidence when you have the facts and the information. Other people couldn't care less about the facts. They just want to know, do you love me? You know, like, I'm just your loan officer. They go, no, I want to know if you care about me. We changed real estate agents simply because my wife didn't feel like one real estate agent cared about her.
Mm.
And so when we brought in these other people, I said, hey, if you want to succeed, you need to be kind and you need to show empathy.
Yes.
You know, because my wife is trusting you with our most valued possession that isn't a human being, it's a house.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes you need a healer. Sometimes you need a visionary, like a seer frequency. And you go, oh, you know, we can do this and this and this, and you're going to move into your next house. That's going to be incredible. And you know, I had one guy come through, and he was the nephew of a super famous person in the fashion industry. And he was like, oh, you should sell your house for this much. It was way low. He goes, because what's a few $100,000 to you? Literally, it was his opening statement. And he walked around, you need changes, you need to change this. And my wife's like, I'm never going to hire this guy. You know, and because he made the mistake of not casting vision.
Yes.
You know, and so each one of those frequencies are really important. And you have to listen. Your customer will tell you what frequency they need by the questions they ask. You know, and you know, we have this mom and daughter who are selling their house, and they're a great team, you know, and they seem to have a real keen sense of what the customer needs. My wife's in Africa. I'm by myself. I've been going in and out, sleeping on the floor, sometimes in a sleeping bag, and you know, staying at my son's house, and you know, just going around. They brought me dinner. They said, "Oh, we brought you dinner. You know, we just finished the open house, and we went." They brought me this beautiful dinner. Like, what agent does that?
Yeah.
And they were paying attention, and they'll get to sell our next house and our next house, right? You know, because they really are paying attention to even the frequencies that we need along the way.
Yeah.
You know, and my needs and Kim needs are different.
Yeah.
You know, she operates on a complete different frequency than I do, and I think being able to pay attention to your customer and realizing that if you have a husband and wife, they're probably two very different frequencies, and it's almost like you have to speak to him, then you have to speak to her, then they have a composite frequency that you have to speak to as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really good.
Yeah, it is good. All right, closing thoughts.
What would you think would be a good way to tee you up for a closing thought?
Let me ask you, if you had to define not the technical aspect of your job, of what you do, but if you could define in the most human way possible, what is it that actually defines your career?
Serving.
To expand on that a little bit.
Serving people. Serving the cause. Giving hope. Showing people a way when they get stuck and helping them get unstuck. Listening. Strategy. I think all of that is part of what we do or have done in our careers. Love.
You know, I think for me, it's always been about really getting clear on why you do what you do. And the clearer I got with that, just the easier things got. But we talked about response. You talked about it today. And I think it's the key to life. And it's the key to relationships. It's the key to everything. And so our business is not any different than your business or the basketball coach or the pastor or, the professor at the university. It's really about how do we manage through our responses in life. I just think that the loan officer has a ton of pressure tied to those responses because their livelihood is so tied to that. And where I think people thrive is that they can stay, in a place of productivity throughout the chaos.
Mm. The certain way to think about what you guys do from the customer side is that's how I've experienced it. There's an odd beauty that you guys are like midwives, and you're helping other people give birth to a dream, to a hope, to an aspiration that they have. And because you've given your life to developing a very clear and specific skill set, you actually become the expert that that person needs to achieve their dream.
Right.
And it's like, a quarterback can look really untalented if he doesn't have receivers who run great patterns.
And centers and tackles that can block well.
But yeah, I know that now you're talking about so many of the teams that are out there. Because we break down sports all the time, and my son would always ask me about quarterbacks, and I go, that's actually a really good quarterback with a terrible offensive line.
Right.
And in some sense, you guys are like an offensive line because you don't really necessarily receive any glamour. But without you, the person who has the ball in hand can't achieve their highest potential.
It's funny you use the metaphor of the midwife or maybe the nurse, because I think that's the right metaphor. Because the realtor is really the doctor in the deal, right? And the mortgage people are professionals, are kind of the secondary. Obviously it doesn't happen. The baby doesn't come out the nurse or the midwife, but the doctor definitely gets the glory, right? And then the parents, get the baby. So I think there is an element of the unsung hero, and I think people need to be okay with that. And that's the ego is the enemy is something that impacts everybody. But where I definitely feel like loan officers do get themselves in troubles, they make it too much about themselves. And just be excited about the role that they get to play.
Well, people in your industry have helped me and my family step into our dreams many times. Awesome. So I'm really grateful for you guys.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, Erwin, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here and just sharing your thoughts and your soul and your essence. And I'm a better person for it.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful for today.
Oh, this has been so much fun. I hope you have another guest. I hope I'm not the last one.
We're one and done here. No.
This is great. Thank you guys.
Well, if you have questions or thoughts or suggestions, please comment, please share. And we're here. We're really here to be a resource for you as you navigate the exciting world of being a loan originator.
I just want to close with the big takeaway for me, which is as loan officers, we need to be great listeners, and we need to show up and identify the frequencies that our clients are at and seek them, pursue them, bring the energy that the room needs, not the energy that we have. And last, but especially not least, we have to be terrible listeners to our negative internal voice.